Welcome, everyone, to Optimizing Content Health for the AI Era. This is our most popular, highly requested coffee chat. We did one last year when we had first introduced AI, but obviously, um, things have changed. We have so many updates. So we wanted to have you guys start off the year. But if it's your first time here, you need a reintroduction. My name is Helene Johnson. I am a learning experience designer on the Responsive Academy team, and I love doing these coffee chats. I'm also joined by my CSA.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I am Marcia, like Helene said. I'm on the Academy team with Helene. We make all kinds of on demand content for you to learn from. For instance, this whole session is part of a path that exists within the Academy that we'll link out later. And we're also joined today by Rithvik, who is on the back end today. He'll be answering your questions, but he is truly the master of AI at Responsive. He's incredible. So we are so lucky to have him on today.
Yeah, so hit Rithik with those questions. Hopefully, we can explain it so there's not that many. Uh, so, in terms of what you guys can expect today, we're going to go over what AI ready content looks like in the content library and set everyone's expectations. We also came up with a really simple framework. We know content management can be really overwhelming. So, we wanted to just put three pillars that you can start with today. Now, if you missed that little preview video at the beginning, the Docs tab is where you're going to access this content. So if you want to download the deck right now, please do so. Also, I'd suggest you download the notes. So we made a notes that you can take during this or where you can follow along. It's a great place to add your questions that you might want to come back to your team or your CSM, but also stay organized because every time we do these webinars, we know it can be like, whoa, this is a lot of information. So hopefully that can break it down for you. And then you can leave with some practical actions you can take without rebuilding your library. And we made the pink Yeti really giant in this image. Don't tell marketing, but of course, we have a pink Yeti giveaway to kick off the year. So that will be right before the Q&A. So hopefully you can stay on till then. With that, Marcia, do you want to kick it off and set the stage for how AI uses on the back end your content library?
Yes, thanks, Elaine. So, what you're looking at right now is a very overwhelming image. We're aware, but we wanted to paint a quick, broad picture of what AI looks like when it's actually working in your system. Now, I'm not going to go into all of the details of this. That is not the purpose of today. However, if you have gotten Responsive AI certified, you're probably familiar with this image. If you'd like to get Responsive AI certified, we will have that on demand version available pretty soon. Super exciting. And you can learn more about this. For today, the focus we really want to take is on that bottom left corner in the knowledge base. So on the right side, you see where responsive AI is working, right? That's all of the mechanisms happening to make sure that when you are putting in a query, it's giving you a response. None of that works if your knowledge base isn't curated. So as you can see, everything is pulling from that consolidated knowledge base that you've curated in your content library by connecting websites, by connecting to your external sources like SharePoint or Google Drive. So without having all of that knowledge base curated and available, your AI is not going to work as well. So that's why when we talk about content management in the AI era, that's why it's so important because without having that solid base and that solid foundation, the rest of AI is not going to do its job as well. The nice thing about this diagram is that it does place in order how AI looks at your content so you can have a better understanding of how that flow goes. So starting at the top, your Q&A pairs are going to be the most powerful when it comes to what AI is looking at. From there, it'll look at your documents. From there, it'll look at any external web sources you provided in your organization settings. And from there, it'll look at your Google Drive and SharePoint. That's not to say that it won't look at everything. It does look at everything. You may have a response pulled from AI that has multiple sources. It has a website and it has a Q&A pair because it is trying to get the best response for you. But in terms of prioritization and what it leans on for that source of truth for you, that is how it's looking at that information. So again, very big picture here of what AI looks like. For today's focus, we're only really looking at that bottom left corner. And if you're interested in learning about more, I love preaching about it. We have the AI certification, but that's why it is so important to make sure that your content is validated whenever you're using AI. With that being said, we do know that content management is a big topic, and there's kind of a lot to think through when it comes to it. There's so many facets. We've tried to simplify it by pulling it into 3 pillars for you of what it means to have updated content health in your library, and that is keeping your content accurate and maintained. That's keeping it clearly structured, so not just in terms of how to find it, but within those Q&A pairs, making sure that those are clearly structured and well defined. And then, of course, keeping your content organized. Before we dive into this any deeper, we do want to make sure you all know we know this is overwhelming. This is a lot of information, and a lot of you have very big libraries. It doesn't have to be perfect in order for you to use AI. It's about getting it AI ready, right? So you can take things bits at a time. That notes guide that Helene created is wonderful because it gives you a checklist, you can prioritize, and you can kind of come up with something that works for you to get your content better over time. You don't have to do everything today, right? So we'll chunk this out for you, give you those 3 pillars, and then from there you can work toward perfection. But knowing how things change, it's never going to be perfect. So just keep that in mind as we go through today. But Helene, do you want to go ahead and take us through that first pillar?
Oops. Yeah, you did it for me. Thank you so much. Okay, so our first pillar is going to be about accuracy and maintenance. And this one is really not new. If you've been around at Responsive, this has been a core aspect of Responsive for forever. And unfortunately, AI did not magically change the rules here. At the end of the day, AI can really only work with what it can find in your content library. And of course, if you have external sources after that, et cetera, as Marcia had explained. But basically, if your content is outdated, AI is going to very confidently give you outdated content. So you want to make sure, that you have the correct answers in your library. To give a really simple example, I think about this because Responsive recently changed its headquarters. So we had to go in and update our internal database to make sure it was the correct information. If someone had gone in and asked that and it didn't happen, it wouldn't have said, this seems suspicious. I'm pretty sure it's in Dallas now, the headquarters, because luckily AI doesn't know everything about us yet. So that's kind of how you can think about it's not that the AI tool is broken, it's just doing exactly what it's supposed to do within the tool. So, when we think about accuracy, the easiest way you can think about it in terms of your content library is first that your content is reflecting current approved information. Second, that there's clear content owners or multiple owners so someone can keep it up to date over time and that they have reviews happening on a major or on a regular cadence. Also, if there's something major in your organization that changes, that's going to, if you introduce a new product, for example, or you're sunsetting a product, that's going to come into those review cycles. Something to kind of think about is AI performance is like a mirror. So it's going to reflect the current state of your content library. So the better the content that you have in there, the better results you have out of it. I did see a question in the Q&A or in the chat about, well, what if I want to point or not have AI look in certain content? Don't forget, you can archive content if you're not sure about it and put it in that archived library. So that way it's not in the main library for everyone to look into. So if you're seeing something, if your sales team is coming to you and they're expressing frustration about certain aspects of things that they're looking in, you can go in and archive that content and then figure out what the issue is from there rather than trying to do it on the fly, for instance. So that is something to consider. Now, the good news is, although the aspect of having accurate content hasn't changed, our product team has done a really good job of introducing a bunch of new tools. And one of those new tools is the content health dashboard. Now, I'm going to launch something really quick for you guys. If none of you have ever heard of the content health dashboard, if you click that link, it should take you right to the help article. And this is going to give you a high level view of where your content library is. If you're following along with me, which I recommend, if you can pull up your instance, you can do so right now or do it after. But if you navigate to your content library and click the little with light bulb icon, wow, my hat is squishing my brain. If you click the light bulb icon, it will take you to your content health dashboard. Again, if you're not finding it, just click that help article and I'll help walk you through it. And this is going to help you decide where you want to take action in terms of your content health. So if you're like, I have no idea if my content library is accurate or up to date, the first place you're going to want to go is that dashboard for this reason. And I'm going to walk you through the different aspects if you've never used it. The nice thing at the top is it's going to get a summary of your overall health of your library. Again, this is based off our mechanisms in the tool, so it might look a little different, but at least it will give you an idea of where you stand. So in this little screenshot example, ours is at a moderate level. Ideally, we want to keep getting that up. We want it in the green range. So um, it will also help you spot trends over time. So it will be helpful if you're trying to make improvements from this month to next, this quarter to next quarter, etc. The next section is called the classification section. And this is where you can spot gaps or inconsistency with how your content is organized. We're going to get into this in one of our pillars, but that's that section right there. The next one is utilization. So this is going to tell you how much of your library is actually going to be used. A good rule of thumb, if you have a really giant library, instead of trying to clean up everything, is first focus on what your team is utilizing the most, um, and then identify those gaps. You can also go in and see the content that no one is using. Maybe that's outdated, or you need to delete it or archive it. So keep that in mind. We also have a duplicate and obsolete section. For those of you who came our product update last year, there is something very exciting coming with that for a feature for that coming soon. So that's just kind of a preview. But for right now, this is where you can identify overlapped or content that's duplicated. So something about AI is it uses and Marcia's gonna have to help me here because she's able to combine it better, but it can combine answers together and give you a response. So if you have a bunch of duplicate answers, that might confuse AI and give you the wrong answer. So you want to make sure that you remove that duplicate content. It's just going to clear up any inconsistencies or confuse your team. Finally, there's that ownership and review section. So this is where your owners are really missing or where reviews are overdue. So it's giving you an idea if that ownership and review process that you have currently set up, is it working, if there are bottlenecks on your team, etc. So really the point here is you don't need to fix everything at once. This dashboard is going to help you see where your library stands today and decide what makes sense to tackle first. Again, if you're using that docs tab and you're following along, you can see very quickly, okay, what can I see high level? Maybe you have absolutely nothing tagged and you have no reviews set up. That's what you're going to want to address first to make sure AI starts working better for you. Now, once you're in there and you've figured out the issues, this is just kind of a map. It doesn't mean you have to do all of them. This is just kind of a menu, I guess you could say, rather than a checklist. So, for example, if your reviews are overdue, that means that you want to set review cycles. So, this is just supposed to give you guys kind of a visual example of the issue, the action, and what the result from the AI will be. All right. So the main takeaway for our first pillar is that accuracy isn't doing big projects over time and over again. It's about building ownership and reviews into your normal workflow, checking that content health dashboard, maybe on a monthly cadence, so that those updates can happen naturally over time and you're not scrambling to fix things after. And that's what's going to, having a healthy content library is going to help your AI consistently give you better results. Now I'm going to let Marcia go into something that I think is going to be very exciting for some of you, all about your Q&A pairs.
Yes, thanks, Helene. So, Helene was just talking about keeping your entire content library maintained by establishing those owners and review cycles. So that way it's staying up to date, consolidating those Q&A pairs from a larger scale. Now we're going to take it and pare it down quite a bit to the individual Q&A pair level, which I've already seen a few questions about. So hopefully this clears it up for you, but we can always come back if you still have questions. But the main idea is with your Q&A pairs now, we need to make sure that you have clear and focused content. So what that means is that we are really only focusing on one concept per Q&A pair. Now I know some of you may have historically built Q&A pairs that look a little bit differently to maybe not what's called bloat your library. So maybe historically you had one question and then you had multiple response types assigned to it. So there are 3 products. They both have the same question. Product A has a response, product B has a response, product C has a response. With AI, that's not going to function as well. You'll want to parse those Q&A pairs out into separate responses so that way you can use pillar 3, organization, to help guide it to the correct response. Otherwise, it's going to look at that Q&A pair and potentially pull information from all of the responses to get you the answer that you need. So, when we're thinking about Q&A pairs now, we really want to make sure that they're focused and they're contained. So, we'll look at some examples as well of what that can look like. So, beyond just having multiple different response types, that also is the same for questions. We want to keep it to one question per Q&A pair. We don't want to have multiple questions within a question um, with a bloated response for AI to try to pull from. And we'll see that kind of in action in just a moment. Some other little tips that we have for creating your Q&A pair structure is going to be having more expansive information. So, I know that sounds a little contradictory. You just said be clear and focused, but now you want to be expansive. What we mean by expansive is that yes or no isn't necessarily going to cut it anymore. Of course, you're going to want to have your Q&A pairs with simple yeses and simple nos just in case you get those very specific questions from a proposal. However, it's important to now expand on those yeses and nos, potentially in different responses, so that if you do need to elaborate on something for some reason, or if a question comes in that's relevant to that response, AI has that information to pull from to expand for you. Otherwise, if you have a question and then yes, and then it says explain, when you try to use AI to help create a response for you to explain, it can probably just be fluff of basically saying, yes, we do this very well, actually, or like have some kind of fluffy information rather than specific, curated, approved language from your team. So, we want to let's recap that, make sure that it's one concept per Q&A pair, but also that we're giving enough information within that Q&A pair that AI can elaborate from it and it can pull the information that it needs. We also want to make sure that we're using customer facing questions. Back to kind of the old, if you've been with responsive since we were RFPIO, you might have had some kind of practices where you were creating questions where you were trying to capture as many keywords as possible so that auto respond or the recommendation engine would catch it. That's not really necessary with AI anymore. Or in fact, even if you're still using, the content library search with semantic search, you don't necessarily need to do that anymore. It's a little bit smarter now. It is looking for keywords, but you don't have to be so specific with it. So, having those different variety of questions is still helpful using your alternate questions to say, okay, this is one way to ask it, this is another way to ask it to capture all ends of the spectrum is good. But you don't have to be death by keyword. You don't have to come up with every scenario. Just having a couple of different variations, depending on customers ask the same question, is going to be acceptable. So, an example that we always give because it's just the easiest one to lean on is where are you located? What is your company address? Same question, worded differently. That's going to be good for your alternate questions, but then having 20 questions that are all random, that's not necessary. So, you can kind of clean that up a little bit now. Finally, we want to make sure that we're defining acronyms and jargon. You have to think about AI as if it's kind of, I don't know, like a baby. It only has the information that you're giving it. It's kind of the same thing when we looked at that diagram earlier. If you're not giving it, it doesn't look outside necessarily to understand what you're talking about. So if you're using acronyms and those acronyms aren't defined, then it's not going to know what you're talking about. So if a customer asks a question using an acronym, the acronym's not in the content library, there's a chance it won't pick up the correct response, and vice versa. If you only have acronyms in your content library and the customer is not using that, then there's a chance there's going to be a mismatch there. So we do want to make sure that anytime we have those acronyms or any of that jargon that might be internal language that we use, that it's clearly defined so that AI can find what's needed and use the responses appropriately. So, all in all, the little tip at the bottom kind of sums this up really nicely. We want to make sure that we're being focused and clear with our Q&A pairs and we're being detailed so that it can have the information it needs, but we don't want to be going all over the place with all of our responses and with all of our topics within a Q&A pair. So let's look at an example really quickly at this Q&A pair here. Before, it's a poorly structured Q&A pair. It says, describe your pricing model, security practice, and data storage approach. That is 3 questions in 1. If we think about how this might work within a proposal, let's say we get a question on just our pricing model. If AI is looking at this Q&A pair as a source of information, it's now having to parse through this response and say, "I think this is the part about pricing model," and then apply that response to that more specific question. Conversely, if we had 3 separate questions in our content library covering all of these topics, it would be able to pull from the correct question, right, to get the information it needs for pricing, when it's that one-off question. But then if this question gets asked and we have all of that information separate and responsive, it'll be able to pull from all of those Q&A pairs to get the best response. So that's what we mean when we say keep it to one topic per Q&A pair. All of this information is a lot of information. It's a lot for AI to pull from and pick and pull what makes sense. So we want to make sure that it's a little bit clearer cut and in different Q&A pairs. Looking something like this. So here we have our 3 separate Q&A pairs. They're all one concept only. They avoid jargon. If there's any acronyms, they are clearly defined. We're asking them in a way that makes sense from a customer. We're not using our internal language to ask the question, especially important with some of those security or product questions that come through. And we're elaborating beyond yes. So, are you SOC 2 compliant? Yes, and here's the information about it in case it gets asked, potentially linking that document onto that Q&A pair so it can be used as well. Now, you may be wondering, what about response headers? Because we talked a little bit about having multiple responses within a Q&A pair. Now, as mentioned earlier, you can have those multiple responses. This is going to work best for maybe short version, long version responses. So, like how I said earlier, if you do have a lot of those self contained yes or no questions and you need to have strictly yes and no, it's okay to have one response be yes and then the next response be that detailed response that you need. So that way it can pull from whichever response it needs. Response headers can also act as a filter. So I think Honey asked a great question earlier. How does it prioritize which response it pulls from in the Q&A pair? If you don't define which response it needs to look at with your filter, then it's going to pull from whatever exists in that Q&A pair. It's not necessarily prioritizing anything. So if you are using response headers already and you have those well defined and they are in your content library, you can use a filter to pull from it, and it will try to pick up on your response header to determine what's the best. Also, I'm going to take a step back. If you're not familiar with what a response header is, we have a picture right there, but it's essentially if you have multiple responses in your Q&A pair, so you have your question and then you have your answers, it's that little header that goes above it that basically organizes your information within the Q&A pair. So that's where we're at. Now, there are some risks that come with leaning on response headers when it comes to your content library. The first one is if you are consistently saving answers from projects into your content library, it retains whatever the response header was in your project when it actually saves into the library. So, unless you already have a process in place where you are updating all of your response headers and it looks really great, and then you're saving it into the library because you have this curated, defined response header catalog, then that's fine. But otherwise, there's a likelihood you have a lot of response headers that say things like response one, response two, comment, things like that that are a little bit more random. And in that scenario, it's really not going to be beneficial for you to use a response header or filter. The other thing to note is that it is an open text field with the response headers. It's not like a tag where you can have a drop down list and you only pull from that consolidated list. It is just open text box. You can make a response header whatever you want. So if there are any typos or if you're using short answer on one and then just short on another, you're not fully spelling it out, then that filter isn't going to work as well because it has 2 options to pull from unless you're selecting everything. So, when we talk about response headers, yes, you can use them. They are very powerful if you have a curated, clean response header list existing in your content library. If you have just a few response headers that you're using and that's part of your structure, great. However, if it's not something you're already working on or not something you already have in your content library, no worries. You don't have to use response headers. But if you want to start using them, just be very careful with how you curate them. Make sure that you're being mindful about the response headers you're creating. And it's worth a conversation with your fuller team to make sure everyone's on the same page about language with it, given the nature of the different variations with that open text box. So keep, just like everything else, keep it small, keep it consistent, and just be careful as you use those response headers. So our key takeaway here is to essentially just keep everything clear, keep it one concept for Q&A pairs. Instead of having multiple ideas into one Q&A pair. So that way AI can pull from what it needs. You reduce the risk of it accidentally grabbing information that's not pertinent. And when we talk about a bloated content library, if that concept is kind of confusing, bloated really only comes when you have a bunch of duplicates and a lot of mismatching information. It is okay to have multiple Q&A pairs or have a lot of Q&A pairs if they are organized, if they're accurate, and if they make sense and they're vetted. So just keep that in mind as you are creating your structure. But Helene, do you want to take us through the third pillar?
Yes, the final pillar is all about organization, meaning if your AI can find the correct information when it's needed. Honestly, it's a lot about your teams too, being able to find the right information. Even again, I get both the pillars that are about before AI, but you know, organizing your content was important for you to do cleanup over time to assign the right users. So, for example, if you were using tags of security, it made it really easy for you to assign your security team, making your content library easy to organize, maintain, update. All of that's still true. The difference with AI now is organization is going to play a really key role in helping your tool find the right information depending on the context. So, to kind of walk through those different organization features, if you've been at Responsive for a while, we know the best thing about coffee chats is we have super users here and new users. So we try to expand it for everyone. But you have different aspects in Responsive of the way you can categorize information. Each one has its own specific use cases of why you want to use it. So I'm going to walk through those, but I'm also going to give a shout out to my Academy team member, Phil. He came up with this great idea to have short, they're kind of like quick TikTok reels. And we actually have one on a majority of these organizational features. So if you want to check this out, if you're like, Helene, I don't even know what the heck a collection is, then bookmark that shorts and watch it after as part of your to-do list. But I'm going to try to explain it right here for you. So the different ways we have tags and hierarchical tags. Yes, I can pronounce that now. We have collections and we have custom fields. So tags are basically like a label or a subject of the way that you've organized your content library. The main idea with here is you don't want them to get too granular or specific because you still have that keyword search. You want them to be a little more general, but you can use the hierarchical tag feature to break them down into subgroups, subfolders, if you will, if you'd like. A rule of thumb that hasn't changed with AI is every Q&A pair should have at least one tag. Of course, you can use that content health dashboard to help you figure that out. It's going to help your AI understand the content by topics. So that's a great option. If you're new to starting, tags are great for you. The second option is collections. And collections can kind of make are allowed. Wow, that was a lot of word all over the place. But collections are basically allow you to segment your library into different groupings. What's really cool about them is you can actually segment different users. So in the example I'm going to give, I'll explain that a little bit in more detail. But for instance, you could have different product lines segmented by collections, different audiences. You could have different teams. If you're a really global company like Responsive, we have different collections based off our sales team if they're in North America or rest of world, for example. So those are different ways that you can think about collections. The main thing here, again, to repeat, is you can segment users. So sometimes we've seen users be like, well, I can't find this content and I know I put it in the library. It's because they didn't make sure that their users had access to that collection. And you can do that in organization settings. We also have something called custom fields. Custom fields are really great if you want to organize your content for reporting purposes, as long as you put it as searchable, that's how the AI can use it. So you'll want to make sure in your checklist that if you want AI to be able to filter via custom fields, that they are searchable. And like I said, they're really good for reporting, ownership, governance. Wow, I can't pronounce anything. Wow, it's just so embarrassing. Um, so think of that with custom fields. And again, these are all going to depend on the way that your content is organized, the size of your organization, and the way your team likes to search for content. And I'll explain in the next slide how that works. Finally, a bonus here that we have is data sets, and they allow you to combine collections and tags as like a filter. So if you're always searching for something with security within the legal collection, you can save that as a data set and it'll make it really fast to find it. So you're not like always constantly searching. Um, so the big takeaway for this is you're not just utilizing the organization for your teams, for your humans anymore. You're also utilizing it for AI. But I think it will be a little bit clearer if we use an example here. So let's say I have two Q&A pairs in the content library. You can see they have kind of similar questions, but the response is going to change based off the location. So for the first one, for the EMEA collection, that has a different response than for my clients that are based in North America. So I've segmented these by collection. Again, this is optional if this makes sense for your team, just using collections here as an example. So let's say the salesperson goes into ask and they ask where the customer data is hosted. That first response you see here had no filter selected. And you can see it did give the answer, it did elaborate, and it was correct. But if you want it to be very clear and specific, think about different products that people might be asking the same question and the answer is going to differ. It's kind of like an if then function. The filters are really going to help you out. So the second example I have, I'm using the EMEA filter. And the third example, I'm using the North America filter. And you can see it gave me a different answer depending on if I give a filter. Now, a tip here, and I highlighted it because I think it's a really cool aspect about collections, is if you already had your sales team member in this example segmented by collection, they wouldn't even need to do a filter because they wouldn't have access to the other collection. So, for example, if I'm based in the North America, as long as I'm only in the North America collection and I don't have access to the EMEA collection, when I go into ask it, I don't even actually have to use that filter. So that's a great tip because I feel like we get questions a lot. Well, I'm trying to teach my team. They're still learning how to use AI. They don't want to click filter, for example. Um, that's a great tip there. Also, to think about with all of these organizations, the different aspects of the tool that we use, like AI draft, for instance, you can set those filters as you're going through AI draft ahead of time. So it's going to save you time if you already have your content library organized there. Finally, this is for those of you who understand my point of why organization matters, but you're still wondering, okay, but where do I actually start? So instead of just jumping in straight into the tools, can be kind of a pulse check if you follow these tips here. A first place to start is where your filters are already being applied today. So are you utilizing filters at the organization level, project level, or even section level? Have you even started doing that at all? So that's helpful to sit back and think about how your proposals are typically organized. If you have clear project types, for instance, are there always common scenarios that follow a certain pattern? If you think that way of how you actually would go in and filter in your day-to-day life, it can be easier then to figure out an organization structure that matches versus trying to fit something in, you know, square peg into a round hole. Um, and we have a lot of resources in the academy if you're interested of where to start there. Another helpful exercise, and we got this from actually meeting you guys on Responsive on Tour, is those if then scenarios. So if someone asks a question and the answer is it depends, that's typically a sign that some sort of filter or organization should exist. So think about your different product lines, for example. Well, yes, it works this way. If this is applied, that's where you can utilize those organizational features better. Finally, visualizing things outside of responsive, especially if you're new, you're trying to learn responsive and it's a new software tool that always takes a second. Fortunately, Marcy and I have been here for so long. As some of you know, I just got off my 5 year sabbatical. So some of these things can come really naturally to us. And I know there's a lot of you that are probably even smarter than we are. I don't doubt that at all. But for those of you who are new and just kind of need a visual, you can always, do sticky boards, whiteboard app if you're working in person, and write out different ways that can be grouped. If you have a team that's already invested in the tool, I already saw some comments like, well, my team likes to do it like this. They should be a part of those conversations for sure. Um, and a really easy way is just to consolidate content. So it's kind of part of that cleanup at the beginning. And if you're following that checklist, that should be fairly straightforward in there. So the one key takeaway for that third pillar is to keep your organization simple and consistent. If your AI knows where to look, it can pull the right content without that extra effort from you. Now, very quickly before we get into the Q&A, just a bonus, we know a lot of people have questions about working in documents because you have to use documents a lot in proposals. The biggest rule of thumb here is to keep them focused. You can stick to one topic per document. That makes the content clearer and much easier to use, especially if it has clear formatting. Things like headers, bolded lists, tables make it easier to find that key information quickly. It's also probably better for your whoever your clients are that you're sending your content to. Another thought here is to avoid combining multiple topics or a lot of FAQs into one document. That's going to be harder for AI to work with. I know it can be quite tempting to just upload it to the content library and forget about it, but it will reflect the AI quality. Of course, if your issuer needs a true file like an SO2 report, you want to have that in the library, and that's a long, really lengthy report. But the main idea is if you're trying to have documents replace your Q&A pairs instead of being an asset to your document, that's when they're better broken into clear Q&A pairs using the tips that Marcia provided. So really here, the tip for documents is to use them to support answers, not replace your well-structured Q&A pairs. All right. We have a bunch of FAQs that we put here. Marcia, I know we're kind of close on time and we have a lot of good questions. Um, so we can run through these or we can get in the Q&A. What do you think?
I think we can just kind of highlight a few of these that are because some of them are coming up a little bit. So, for instance, I think a good one is can responsive AI still work if our library is not very healthy yet? Yes, it still works. Responsive AI will still try to pull answers for you. Having a healthy content library just means that it's pulling better responses for you and it's just making it stronger so you're not having to go back and forth or doing as many edits to it. So like we mentioned at the top of this, the point is to get you to a place where you feel like you're working on it so it can continue to improve versus fixing everything now so you can actually use it. You don't have to have it all in a perfect place before you get started. The question about is it better to delete outdated content or just update it, excuse me, is a good one. When we think about deleting versus updating, it kind of depends on how you're looking at your content. If that historical information like activities, use count, what's been updated on it, if that's all very important to you, then you'll want to make sure you're updating Q&A pairs so you can maintain that history of the Q&A pair. However, if, that's not relevant to you and you have this new content that's shiny and pretty and works better, you can go ahead and get rid of it and then just start over with that new content. So it's really preferential based on how you are engaging with your library. Helene, is there anything else from this one that you want to call out?
I think the internal language one is good because we do have that alert text functionality. So make sure you utilize that. Like if you're putting stuff like tips for your team, like in the Q&A pair, the AI will pick up on that. So take advantage of internal notes and alert text if you want to give information to your team, or of course even comments, for example, because they can click into the Q&A pair. Um, One on this page, a general idea about AI, like what it struggles with, even when your content library is healthy, is things that are ambiguous or open to interpretation. So, like if it's nuance or changing context, kind of that if then AI might struggle to understand it. We've kind of hit on this a lot. Um, can too much content hurt AI performance? It's more about duplicate and outdated content that can reduce accuracy. So I think there was even comment about a rule of thumb with how much, content in your library. It's more about how much of that content is actually healthy that will make a difference there.
We're talking about the content help dashboard and prioritization. For us, if I'm looking at our content help dashboard, we're very do as we say, not as we do here. I can see that this is the lowest score. So this is probably one I want to go ahead and start working on first. Like Helene said, if you're looking at this and it's all wee woo, red alert, alert, then maybe kind of take some time and think, okay, what matters to us the most right now? Or what can we make the biggest impact on at this point? So like the duplicate and obsolete here, I see I have 73 obsolete Q&A pairs. I can go ahead and go straight to my obsolete report, which is going to show me all the Q&A pairs that haven't been used in a certain amount of time. I can filter further. And if I want to go ahead and just get rid of all of them, I can do my select all and I can delete or archive them, or I can kind of start looking through that. So anywhere that you can kind of take that bulk action so you can get rid of something will reduce the amount of Q&A pairs you're looking at. The other question that I'm going to quickly go through, because we got a lot of it, is can I update my response headers? The answer is yes. So you can update your response header if you don't have a bunch of Q&A pairs in review. There we go. You can update your response header directly within a Q&A card. So if you see one that you don't like, oh, I'm not showing it. Share this tab instead. If you see a Q&A pair you don't like, then you can edit it directly. Sorry for the jump scare. I'm in the content library now. If you want to update in bulk, you can also either, filter down to find things in bulk, or you can select all, go to more, go to your bulk options. And within your bulk options and answer, you can come in here and say, okay, I want everything that says comments and answer and response, response, response. I want all of this to just say response, and then I can change it all at once. So that is a possibility. So if you have a lot of crazy response headers in your content library and you're wanting to consolidate, my recommendation is to just kind of take this approach to try to get it all cleaned up at once. That is a possibility. I'll get off my soapbox now, unless there's anything else you want me to show, Helene.
No, I think everyone always appreciates seeing bulk actions. Back when I was a CSM, I always used to jump into people's response headers and clean them up because it was so fun. We jump right back in the slide. I think we've answered most of the questions, and I don't want to overwhelm anyone. And have a great rest of your week and stay warm.
Yes, stay so warm. Put your hats and your scarves on. If this is the warmest I've been working all week. So I hope you all are staying warm as well.
Thank you guys so much. We'll see
Yep.
you soon.
Yep. Bye.